All right, guys, I think we're just about on the air. Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to another flawless launch of the amazing ComicBase live stream. I'd like to thank everyone who made it here. It was a little more chaotic than even usual for us, getting ready for this one. We we wear a lot of hats around here, and video producer is only occasionally one for at least a couple hours a week. But thank you all for joining us here. We just got the announcement posted to the website, and hopefully people will make it in as we go. I got a little ambitious, frankly. I strangely enough, I was, you'll never believe this, I was ahead of schedule there for a moment at the beginning of the day. And I thought now is a wonderful time to re-edit the opening theme series for the intro video, because it's always been a little too quiet and need compression and things like that. And so got that going, restriped it, re-rendered it, put it up to the Stream Deck. One thing I did not have a chance to do right before showtime is actually run a live test of the actual video being, in production on the whole thing, and it worked exactly as well as you would think that an untested piece of video on a live video production would go. Which is to say, it's not playing whatsoever. I'm dipping down right now and trying to restart the Stream Deck just in case that brings things back to life. But anyway, if not, we'll see the glorious premiere of the new one on next week's show. But anyway, thank you all for making it here. I'm Pete Bickford. I make ComicBase, and I'm one of the worst podcasters you'll ever see on the internet, but we do our best here. And and anyway, we just launched ComicBase 26.2, which I'll be telling you all about on today's show. And before I get into it, though, I do want to thank the people who braved the thing to make it here. Jesse Comics is first in the door from the sunny Pacific Northwest. You don't hear that phrase all that often. Mike Beeb's joining us here, also from a fine day in the Pacific Northwest up in Vancouver. Robbie's joining us here from, he says a few days ago it was 89 degrees. The wind chill is 50, and now today the wind chill is 50 degrees. That's what you get when you live near a Lake Erie. Agent of Camp's in the house, and I think there might even be a couple other folks on here. Oro Vejo's coming in here from Minneapolis, clouding up, and it's definitely getting cloudy up here as well. Yeah, it's one thing that the worst the worst planned things of man and podcaster come when you get the message over Slack. Oh, sorry, your coverage. I have to take off right now. I because of thing happening with family. Phone call rings, involved technical support thing, and then other things like that. And it's like, the live stream's coming up, and I could, okay, well, there's where we go. Life in a small business. Anyway, hi. So let's get into it just a little bit. Before I get into the ComicBase 26.2, there is some very notable industry news that's happened this week. Dan Buckley has been the publisher of Marvel Comics. He's been with Marvel Comics for like 30 years in various roles, but most recently their publisher. And Disney, who is now the corporate owner of Marvel, has decided it is time for changes. And so he has been quietly shown the door. He's quiet probably because there's non-disparagement clauses and things like that to happen when you are separated from a company. Yeah, he's been there. He as the obit for his career at Marvel goes. They saw his change from a comics publisher with dreams of TV and film success into a franchise and a brand where comics is smaller but integral part inside of a massive multimedia empire. Yeah, he's been the publisher for the last 23 years, and he's been shown the door. Interestingly, the heads of franchise, I believe. Let me see what the actual name of the title is on the replacement. His new the title had been passed to Brad Winderbaum, which is the executive in charge of Marvel's TV and animation work. Comics, let's see here, is basically a minor part of his job, all things considered. And he is Disney Music Group's general manager. I'm sorry, Dave. He's also being joined by Disney Music Group's general manager, David Abdo, who is handling all the licensing for Disney's music. You might remember a little song called like "Let It Go." Made them a little bit of money from time to time, but he's also taking over some of the duties of what was Dan's old job. Interestingly, Disney is not appointing a new publisher as head of Marvel, and honestly, I don't love what that says about the priority of comics within Disney. what it seems to be is that they're basically being seen as their rightful role of what a lot of people have always thought of them as, or ever since the success of the cinematic universe and the emergence of Disney Plus. They're basically being seen almost as like an IP farm for the latter thing. Whereas I think most of the people watching this show and who grew up on comics think of Marvel Comics as the source of all that stuff. They're now almost being organizationally, at least treated as a bit of an afterthought, which I hope I'm wrong about this one, because it would be a little sad if so. But definitely changing the wind on that one. We'll see what happens. DC also owned by giant corporate entities, so the big two, yeah, it's life in the big city on as far as knowing where comics are being roll on that whole thing is, and it's not super encouraging for watching the platform on that one. So anyway, best to Dan in future endeavors, but he put in some good years. Honestly, my beef with him as a publisher is not great. It's I don't like some of the direction that Disney has taken Marvel with over the last number of years in terms of their comic properties. But honestly, my main gripes with Marvel's output have honestly been more the province of editorial rather than publishing. And so you do kind of wonder what's happening with CB Cebulski's job and such in the future. So, yeah, I guess in general, I would prefer to see a stronger editorial hand on behalf of both of the big two. In terms of steering the comic lines and protecting the IP that we all kind of grew up and love. So that is as far as I will comment on that particular issue. But moving on. All right. So is there anything else that was absolutely urgent we want to get into on this one? If not, I'm going to be basically talking about ComicBase. About ComicBase 26.2. If you guys have questions in the comments, please put them in there, and I will try to adjust them as best as I can. And then a little bit about AI and AI comic books, a little bit also about questions that have arisen about pricing, and we'll take it from there. But I definitely, if you guys have questions, please post them in chat, and I will try to take them. If you could put them to @ComicBase TV, that would help me out a lot. All right, so let's switch over to it right now, and I think if my demo will, yes, here we are. And yes, it is actually cooperating for once. So here we are, ComicBase 26.2. This is our big quarterly update for ComicBase. It's a free one to everyone who uses ComicBase right now. If you're a current ComicBase 2026 subscriber, all you got to do is go into the internet menu, say check for updates. It's going to tell you there's a new 26.2 in town. Do you want to download? The right answer is yes, very much so. So yes, do that. Download update your program. If you haven't updated since ComicBase 26.1, you'll probably see it making some changes to your database. That's all for the good. It's basically adding in some new fields that we need to do to take advantage of the new tag structure. If you're coming in from a very old version, you might also see it do some other updates to be more efficient in terms of indexing and things like that. But give that a go. It shouldn't take more than a minute or two to get it going on the whole thing, and then you are ready for the new world. Now, these are our quarterly updates. These are the only ones that we actually force. Normally, when you're downloading updates, or you say check for updates, unless you have interim updates checked when you're checking for updates, let me go ahead and flip over to that so you can actually see it. If you say setup and go to preferences, all right. If at the very top of this you have check for interim updates checked, then you're going to see every little thing that we do. If not, if you just have that set default settings, then you're only going to see the major updates, the quarterly updates. We do this because we don't want to burn everybody out. It's not everything we do is of great note to everyone, and so it gets exhausting if every single time you launch a program there's a new update of things. But we are constantly working on ComicBase, so if you do like seeing every little thing as we go, I'll go ahead and say check for updates. You'll get all of the updates earlier. If you've been doing that, you've actually been using ComicBase 26.2 effectively for quite some time, and so there isn't going to be a ton that's brand new for you guys, although there was a last-minute breaking surprise I'll hope to share on this one. But anyway, go ahead. If you just say go up under, let me go ahead and save those, say Internet, check for updates, and if you haven't already updated, it's going to say there's a brand new ComicBase 26.2. Do you want to download it? Say yes, and you'll be good to go. I just did that, and I also posted this week's content update, and as a result, my demo database over here gained a little bit of money. What's about 1% in value. It's funny because for once I've been actually seeing the value of my own collection steadily climbing over the last few weeks. by the way, when you're talking about pricing, what we're really doing basically is doing a rolling average of the market. But it's like, oh, hey, we've actually seen some broad-based gains in the comic market of late. But it's just some sitting there thinking, yes, yeah, people will be happy about that, because we always call the market exactly as we see. We don't put our thumb on the scale, and we just kind of say, well, what's the prevailing list of people. We track about 2 million prices off of Atomic Avenue and Heritage Auctions every month, and we just say, well, what are things being listed at, and what are they selling at, and that's what generates what the price is every week, is basically the rolling average of all that data. We don't make it up ourselves, except in extreme situations, which we'll get to in a minute. But I always thought, well, people are very happy about that, because the price seems like they've been going up on a very broad-based way. You're not going to see a more broad-based collection than what we have in ComicBase, because we buy kind of one of everything. And I thought, well, that's pretty great. And then immediately after I got done thinking that to myself, I got a note from someone saying, hey, my collection lost a bunch of value lately. What's going on? And I'm like, yeah. But anyway, we'll talk about pricing in a bit. But let's move on with other things. So how you get ComicBase 26.2, if you already have it, the deal on subscriptions and things like that is, when you buy ComicBase, we sell you the software, and the software runs forever. But anything that involves web servers, we include a free year of content, price, and title updates, as well as program updates. It's actually bundled in with the purchase price of the program. Now, our devious plan to control the universe is that we hope that at the end of that year, you'll say, wow, you guys do a hell of a lot of work. It's really kind of cool having my whole collection kept up to date with all the brand new things, all the new covers, and all the new pricing that comes out every week. That's an enormous amount of work. And yes, indeed, it definitely is. And we're very much hoping that by the end of that year, you say, wow, I would very much rather have you do that work than me having to enter all that stuff myself. And this is pretty great. And so I will happily pay the update fee, which tends to run about, depending on which version you've bought of the program. It's less than what you paid originally. It can be as little as a third of what you paid originally, just to keep the program updated. But yeah, and we're hoping that for the price of a couple cups of coffee a month, that you're happy to have us do all the work for you, and that you'll want to subscribe and keep that going. So that is our devious plan. I've now gone out in the open and said what it is for world domination, and that's how we kind of keep the lights on around here. But thank you for all of you who actually go with that and help us keep the lights on. So we very much appreciate it. So as part of all that, as you might have noticed, you get all the program updates that come out during that year for free. So ComicBase 26.2 is one of those free updates that came out during the term. If you're using ComicBase 2026 right now, this is a freebie to you. So all you got to do is download it, and it does not cost you another dime. If you are still using ComicBase 2025, shame on you. You should definitely be updating it, because you're missing a lot of really great stuff. But go ahead and just go to my account, and then registrations at comicbase.com. Hit the upgrade button and get back in the swing of things, because you're missing a lot of stuff. We have been really, really busy this year. You might see our announcement just a couple of weeks ago that we just passed 1.2 million covers in the ComicBase Archive edition. It's just absolutely astonishing amounts of stuff every week. And on an average week, we're adding something like 2,000-3,000 new covers on a slow week, as well as sometimes thousands, if not tens of thousands, of price updates, new comics, and so forth. So yeah, it's there's a lot to keep up on, and if you have been missing out, please hit that update button, because you will not regret it. All right, so once you've updated for ComicBase 2026, the main features are these. Number one is the 1.2 million covers that I just talked about. But beyond that is, you might have noticed these attractive little, they're called pills. I didn't make the name, but basically you notice these tags along the top of this thing, which let you designate different genres for the different books in the database. Now, these started their history years and years and years ago, as we had a list of 23 genres that we thought covered the entirety of the comic-based world. This is back when we were working with Comics Buyer's Guide, and it was considered quite expensive for the time. After a while, though, we realized that there's something like 7,000 titles in ComicBase that are labeled superhero, and they weren't really being particularly descriptive for helping you find the sort of things that are the things that you might like. So we had the idea, as we did ComicBase 2020, as you might have noticed, 6-7 years ago, saying, well, how about if we allowed people to have tags? They could be completely customized to you, just whatever is meaningful to you, and so you could design them yourself. You're not limited to those 23 genres. You could call them anything you like. And that was a great idea. And some of you guys have been using the tag feature for all these years, but most of you weren't. And one of the big problems is we didn't have a way of getting new tags out to you. And if you had tags that you wanted to share with us, we didn't have a way of saying, oh, yeah, it's a great tag for that series. Absolutely do it. So, one of the great big initiatives that we did this quarter is we sat down there with our list of 90,000 titles that were in the database of both, comics, books, magazines, even newspapers. And we said, okay, can we find a way of coming up with a comprehensible list of tags which describe all of these, not just the 23 that we used to have? No, well, first of all, and this is actually one of those things where we actually turn to AI for help on, because otherwise it'd be just an exercise of just navel gazing with all the staff over here, kind of saying, well, how many terms can we come up with as a vocabulary to talk about the entire world of comic books, which is it covers a lot of genres, a lot of different themes and so forth. So what we did is we actually, I'm sorry, I got some bleh. So what we did is we sat out there and we actually set up a AI agent to run around and investigate the aspects of all the titles we were talking about. It helps that we have descriptions, a lot of data about them all. And we said, okay, if you were coming up with a codex to talk about all these things, could you come up with a list of like 300, 400 terms, which allowed you to sum them up and give you descriptive things? And as a result, it came back with the things, instead of just having superhero and action adventure and crime, and the other 23 basic ones, it came up with much more descriptive things like noir or dark fantasy or kung fu, etc. And so you're suddenly okay. If I like Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, perhaps I might also like various other kung fu related titles and so forth. So yeah, that's great. And I thought, okay, when we looked at the 400, but we thought, we still want more. And so we did is we tuned it up a little bit more, and we send the AI out again another time. And matter of fact, the time after that as well. And we said, okay, can we dial in this codex, even more, to give you more vectors to dial in on the sort of things that are interesting to you. And in the end, we came up with a list of about 800 different tag terms that are part of the official canon of ComicBase. I think we're up to something like 815 of them right now. And so it can be everything from, like in this case, Absolute Batman is an alternate history. It involves Batman, of course. It's not just superheroes and so forth. But let's say we go to something, let's do something very unadvisable and just go to a random title right now, like Epic is an anthology of science fiction and fantasy. From Comics Tribe involves I'm trying to find something that's really strange. Historical fiction, epic battles of the Civil War. So let's say I just really like Civil War type stuff. In which case, yes, here we are, Antietam. Ironically, Civil War, referring to the Marvel Civil War, which maybe we ought to break that one out on another pass and something else. But Tales of the Blue and Gray and so forth. Let's say I just like war books. In which case, everything from 12 o'clock a high to air fighters and so forth. But yeah, American action. It's like it's kind of cool. It gives you a great way of kind of exploring things that you would not necessarily have found before, and it's neat stuff like that. This is it's a cool way of breaking down the titles, and nice thing now is we also have the ability to push these out as part of the update, so that when a new title comes out, you actually get these tags as part of the data that you're getting. But just as importantly from that is we now also have the ability to take new tags from you. So let's say there's something that you are really fascinated in, like let's say you really like modern noir, let me think about Justified, right? Is an example of a modern noir type thing, or like a modern western or something like that. You take the idea that I really like the genre, and so as I go and I index my type things, I'm going to add that as a genre. If we think it's of general use, we can actually bless that genre. We can say, okay, yeah, that's part of our approved set right now. And it actually becomes something that is part of the weekly update that goes down to new people, and then they can actually see that as part of the tags when they go and they download the updates every week. So we actually have a way of sharing tags now. Now we are, we're not going to say just any rando thing. So if this is a tag that reminds you of the class project you did back in Mrs. Smith's middle school or something, and so you want to tag it with Mrs. Smith's middle school, that is not something we're going to take as a tag. But by all means, feel free to tag your own copy of that one. That's no problem with that. And so if you want to go and pick up all the books that were part of Mrs. Smith's middle school class project of Create Your Own Comic Book, which, by the way, is it's not Mrs. Smith, but there actually is, the titles have been added over the years to people's databases that were exactly that project. Or let's see, you want to tag something as it was part of. Oh God, what's the contest for create a comic book in 24? 20, I think it's called the 24-hour comic project. Various comic titles have come out of that one. There's never been a way of associating those all at once before, and now there is. And so that's kind of neat because it gives us a way of spotlighting new things and so forth. You'll occasionally see this show up on as Atomic Avenue interest carousels and so forth. And so it gives us a way of having neat little connections between stuff. So we're very excited to have that one. Let's see here. Let's see. Someone's just said, just tried 26.2 is still grinding away into server. Possibly. Depending on what you're doing, it does take a little while for certain updates to propagate to the field. So if you're still having trouble after the show, let us know and we'll get going. But yes, we've just pushed this whole thing. It's fresh off the presses. So anyway, so as far as tags go, the way they get set, and let me go ahead and show this right now, and this is another thing that's new in this version, is if you right click on a title itself, you can actually go straight from here into editing the title information. This is a new shortcut that's built in ComicBase. It used to be that you'd have to double click on an issue and then edit the title information from there, but now you can jump straight into an issue and go ahead and jump into all the basic information about that whole series. Now here you get everything from this is it was published by a company called Historical back in 1998. It's a monthly series. You could give a description if you want. But down here in the bottom right, you've got the tags. Now you can search tags. Now let's say we got war. I don't know. I'm trying to think what else I would possibly add to this one. You could say nonfiction. I'm not sure if it is or not, but possibly it is. Let me go ahead and just add nonfiction to it. But if you just type the first couple letters of a tag here, if it's a tag that we know about, we will suggest it. So if you type CR, here's crime, true crime, organized crime, all the crimes, we have them all. But you can do that and add it. Or another neat thing you can do here is you can actually have it suggest tags via AI. This is brand new. So let's see if I were to go ahead and let the AI agent go and say what other tags might be appropriate for this. Let's see if it comes up for anything. And it suggests military history. Okay, that's a good one. Action adventure, civil war, historical fiction. Okay, yeah, that's a good list. And hit go, and there you are. So yeah, that's something that's brand new in the whole thing. We hope you dig it. And like I say, if you guys wind up inventing your own tags as you go, do it thoughtfully. Feel free to discuss things you think are of general use to people, but all you got to do is just submit them. If you want to add them yourself, is just go ahead and tag your own stuff. And whenever you submit any issue of that series, if you go ahead and say submit new or corrected data, sorry, I'm giving away a future podcast thing there. It's going to send it to our editors, and along with all the other information you've sent us about that issue, it'll also send us any new tags you've done, and that's where our editors can decide, well, do we like your tags? Do we like our tags? Is it a brand new tag that we want to bless into general distribution? And we'll take it from there. So that is one of the biggest architectural changes that's coming out in ComicBase 26.2. But there are a few other things that went down. Let me see here. Some people have we've fixed up a couple of little bugs. One of them has been a little annoying to people, and it's come up. Is there was a glitch that came up in the Crystal Reports engine with dealing with custom fields, and it popped up its ugly head when you were printing item checklists and collection reports and so forth that involved custom fields. That has now been fixed now, so if you're still having trouble with that one, make sure you've updated your program, and that should take care of that for you. Let's see here. You can now, when you do a title search, so let's go ahead and, if I were to go, let's go ahead and do a search for, let's go, I don't know. I'm going to search comic books, and let's look for series field of publisher. And let's look for EC, right? Oh, of course, I just found just one. All right, so let's do this a different way. All right. You know what? I think I can do this. What is it? What's a fun way to do this search? All right, so let's just go ahead and, was it EC Comics? I think that's my problem on this one. All right. let's go ahead and okay, let's go with I'm just blanking. So let's just go ahead and look for Marvel. All right, so here's Marvel Comics. So we've got a lot more information that we show now when you do a title-based search. But one thing that's really nice here is instead of just showing you the title, name, and everything else, it also shows you the cover picture as well. And you also can go ahead and print these on quick reports and so forth, which is something we haven't always been able to do before. But anyway, so that's cool. That is brand new. We hope you dig that. And let me think what else that I wanted to say about that. I do have notes. Really, I do. Let's see. Title finds says far faster. They include new fields like tags, so forth. So we surfaced all this stuff. So if you've been using custom checks for things like this is a title I collect, this is something I want, so forth, that information now appears right out in the search field here, and you can edit it from there as well. Let's see. Title information can now be quick changed. So let's say if you did a title search and you're working with things like that, and you say, yeah, all these 2090, all these ones over here, I want to mark custom check 1 or 2 that, so forth. I can actually go and say Control G and say quick change for these, 6 things. I want to set the custom check 1, 2, 3 to be something, or, I want to mark it as something I collect. I want to say that it, has a certain tag. Let's say it's part of the 2099 universe and so forth. You can do all that right from here. So that's kind of cool. Again, we hope you dig that. And other things that are kind of cool, weird, and random about things. So if you were using ComicBase on multiple monitors, there was an issue that we had beforehand when you drag ComicBase from one monitor to another. Sometimes if it wasn't your main monitor, certain things would have trouble. It was actually a Windows scaling issue built in the whole thing. And we managed to do some pretty involved voodoo on the whole thing, but we actually managed to make that work a bit better. We actually hope to improve on that in the future, but at least you're not going to get into like weird crashy bugs and everything if you're clicking on the names of very long combo boxes when you've dragged a monitor or something which has a different resolution, which is something that we had to get more into the Windows internals than you would ever want to know about that in order to solve that one, but at least that's a thing now. We've improved the legibility of the value graphs, so let me go ahead and pull up something that has an actual issue. So Epic Battles Civil War is not going to get me there. Let's just pick up a random Batman title and go from there. All right, Batman 3rd Series. All right, so let's say I wanted to fill up my issues of Batman 3rd Series, and here I got to take myself off the screen because I'm blocking the exact part of the screen that I want to show you. So let me do that. Okay, so when you're clicking on these guys right here, you have the option in ComicBase to include a value graph as you go. If you haven't seen it in your copy of ComicBase, make sure you go over here under View and make sure you have Include Value Graph checked. If you do have that, then what will happen is every time you click on something in ComicBase, it'll actually go out and check its price in its value history if you have ComicBase Pro or better, but it also show its current availability on Atomic Avenue. So if you're sitting there saying, hey, I'd actually like to buy a copy of ComicBase Batman 3rd Series, it'll say, well, yeah, there's actually 29 copies available as low as $1.99, which you can get, and click there to see the available properties. And you can do that from pretty much anything. Just go ahead and just pick an issue, and if they've got some to go, and you can get there. Here's good Lord, which one is this even more? So here's the M copy of Batman 3rd Series. 2 copies from $4, and you can just put in your order from there. But anyway, one thing that used to be kind of a problem about this is the font was not great. We've done some very involved tricks here using what they're called variable fonts there to make them a bit more clear, and we also prevent them from squishing up as much as they used to. So that has gone on. Other things that we did, and this is just recently on the whole thing, is one of the things that actually slipped our final release of ComicBase, and the reason that we're talking now on a Thursday and not a Wednesday, is right before we went to press on this one, I gave into the temptation of saying there was one last reported bug that we had ever seen for ComicBase 2026, 26.2 in the betas. The problem is it had never been able to be reproduced, so it was driving us around the bend, it was just a display bug. It was like if there were certain ways, and I'd seen it myself, so I knew it was real. If you buzz around the title, if you've got different things open and closing and selecting issues and deselecting issues, there was apparently a state you could get into somehow where it would sort of mangle up the tags at the top, and it was, it was solved. All you got to do is go to the next title, and you'd be right as rain on the whole thing. But it's when you're showing off tags, it was bad, and so I wasn't going to have that happen to me, as we were going on the whole thing. And so I gave into the temptation of really, really, really doing a thorough code scrub of all the layout issues for this entire screen, and basically refactoring how everything about it gets put down on the page. And so as a result, a couple things happened that were actually kind of good. One is, like, we got rid of our weird disappearing, pills, genre pills, or tag pills. We got rid of that bug, but at the same time, we also managed to clean up the display of some of these things. So it's actually, it used the screen space much more nicely than it did before. There's a lot less redrawing and flicker as you go on the whole thing, and in a weird little, you can show the sort of obsessiveness that we have of things. Is I'm very happy to say we took a whole 0.8 seconds off the startup time of ComicBase, because of how carefully we managed the drawing states of the form as you start going. So if you thought, wow, I haven't got all 3.5 seconds for it to launch on my computer beforehand, well, now if you got 2 3/4 seconds for it to launch, now you're good to go. And honestly, if it's taking a lot more like that, then that's a problem. Steve Dazzler just says, the other problem with publisher EC is it doesn't have periods like E.C. and needs to be corrected. So yes, good on me for going like like an arrow straight to one of the few typographical errors we had on that one. So look for that one in next week's update, where we correct the publisher on that one issue. So thank you for that one. That's pretty good. Age the Camp says, no new ComicBase human computing apparel to celebrate the new release. Not for the quarterly releases, not in general. Typically we save that stuff for the the big yearly releases. But we'll see what we can do on that one. We didn't do t-shirts for ComicBase 2026. Its code name was Metropolis, and we'll get into that in a minute probably. But we didn't do any cool Metropolis swag this time out, like we did for Transformer and some of the other ones. Like at one point we all had challenge coins with the Transformer logo on it for anyone who was involved in the testing on it. But the quarterly releases we typically don't do swag for, because it's a roll up of all the changes that we're doing everything, and we want to just kind of put them out there. But we're glad to have gotten that one going. All right, so what other things I want to say about ComicBase 2026 while we're here? So yeah, we did a little bit of last minute visual polish on the whole thing. We think you'll dig it. Give it a go. And like I say, if you're still having trouble with your server after the show, it seemed like it was downloading just fine for us. But if you have any trouble after, please message us, and we'll give the distribution servers a kick, or whatever we got to do to make sure they're working for you. But yeah, there's a lot of download activities you can imagine right now, so it might be that something is just a little busy right now. All right, other things are going on in life. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. One, state of AI. So every time we do major yearly releases, now the yearly release, one of the reasons we shipped ComicBase 26.2 now is because it was time to kind of start putting a wrap on the Metropolis cycle, because we try to go for about 3-4 releases a year. We call them quarterly. They wind up being like trimester-y, as much as anything. But we'll basically put up the big bang, big release, followed by 1 or 2 major roll-ups of all the little things going on. At this point, you might have noticed that we're up to build 4001, which is to say, since we started building ComicBase 2026, we've compiled it 4001 times. Or put together builds in order to push little changes as we went there. So it's, as you can tell, it's an enormous amount of work that goes into it, and the program will change a lot between its first go at bat and the last. But every year, it's time for us to think, okay, what are the major architectural or just really big changes that we want to talk about? Even something like adding a whole tag interchange system and things like that. Now, that's actually kind of more of a quarterly release sort of thing. It's not typically a thing that we would form into an annual release. The annual releases tend to be kind of epic. So one of the things that happened with ComicBase 2026 is we basically had gone through the entire ComicBase code base and improved, the speed of everything by, all the core routines in ComicBase got faster. I'm sorry, I'm talking about ComicBase 2025, by between 40 and 400, about between 40% and 4 times, 400%. Just everything got far, far faster, which was great because we were also moving just a ton more content down the line. You guys watching the updates, you'll notice that like we went from, moving like, couple, dozens, hundreds of pictures every week to suddenly we're pushing thousands. So I mean, the pace of change has been just off the darn hook as we go. So it's really good that we've had those kind of changes in the back end of the system to make it so you can process them much faster. Other things we did with Metropolis is we had a much stronger integration with the mobile application. We added features to the professional and express editions where they're now able to download covers in certain limited amounts. They get hundreds of thousands of images of the covers that come with base products, and not just the archive edition, but even like the express and pro editions. Granted, there are smaller images from the major publishers only, as opposed to the what we have over 10,000 publishers now, I believe, in the archive edition. But for the main things, like let's say you're a Marvel guy or an Image guy or things like that, if you have the Pro edition now, you can get cover reference for all the things there. The reason being between that is that image reference in this world of variance that we live in is just it stopped being a nice to have. It really became a necessity, and we wanted to reflect that. So those were all the major changes that went down when we did Metropolis. So Metropolis, we have a process in the back end where we kind of, how do we pick these code names, for what eventually becomes, I mean, like, it's not probably a great leap of logic to guess that next year's release of ComicBase is probably going to be called ComicBase 2027, right? We've been doing the year thing for a while now. But so why go with code names? Well, part of it is just for fun. I come out of, working at Apple and things like that, where you never got a chance to talk about your product name until it was released by marketing. And so when you wanted to have the customer T-shirt and the team T-shirt and things like that, it was always a T-shirt that was around the code name of the project. So if anyone saw you walking around the whole thing, they wouldn't be like, "Oh yeah, Apple's releasing a new blah blah blah." And so but you might have a like if you were working on, say, the speech recognition T-shirt. You might, have a T-shirt where, it says something like, "I helped Apple wreck a nice beach." Get it? Recognize speech. But I mean, that's about as explicit as anyone ever let us get at Apple with, shirts until the product was launched. But yeah, all the fun comes from, the making, right? And that's honestly a lot of the fun of running ComicBase is I get to create, great new things every year. Try to make this, keep the game interesting for everyone. But anyway, so we have the idea of we need a code name. And so, but what is the code name? Now, a lot of times we have an art concept, which will shape it. So for instance, when we were doing, there was a release called Burning Man. And that was very much because we already knew what we wanted to do for the cover. We had a picture of a guy who basically the concept was, we told the artist is like, it's like a beach bum, Venice Beach, addict who took a hot shot of the wrong kind of stuff, and he wakes up and he's got superpowers. It's almost like a play on the original Human Torch cover off Marvel Comics #1, except he's a crazed lunatic with flame powers in a bank vault with a dead body at his feet, and the rent a security guard has just, the underpaid schmuck who has to kind of keep patrol of the whole thing, has just discovered this horrific scene in the bank vault and is realizing he's in a world of trouble. And we had this terrific idea for the pictures, very well fleshed out in our head, and we saw the art for it, and we just like lost it. And so, well, what are we going to call that release? And the answer is, of course, we're going to call it Burning Man. Now, at that point, we put out dummy artwork with stuff from the Burning Man Festival, while we're under a development on the whole thing until we actually showed the final thing. Metropolis was an interesting one for us. The code name out of that one came out of both the idea that we wanted to be global in scope and things like that, where it was much around the idea of uniting the mobile platforms and things like that in a way that we hadn't done before. One of the things that interleaved with Metropolis's release is we brought the mobile app in-house instead of having it as a third-party contractor operation that we could update only once in a blue moon. It became something that was really it was definitely going to be much more integral to the product. That was part of it. But we also had the idea that, the thing that's in the background, I think, of every programmer on the planet right now is the specter of AI had come up. I told the story of, it was probably about a year and a couple months ago, where I'm typing along. There'd been some new update to our ID, which is the development environment that we're tapping in all the time as we're coding. Microsoft said, like, yeah, we're putting some new thingies in here, something about AI, something about coding, and I'm typing along and I'm writing a routine which was meant to, after you download an update, it was meant to go ahead and see if it could find any matches to something whose name had changed by its barcode. And so I was typing along something like, resolve title by barcode, and I was, pausing for a second as you gather your thoughts, because I'm thinking, okay, what parameters is it going to need, and what would it call, and so forth. And during the time I was pausing, suddenly this new tool auto completed, based on, looking at the code around what I was typing and knowing that I was going to be looking for a single thing, not a list of things, and so forth. It actually started, suggesting like lines of code, just, in the time I was typing. It was like the weirdest thing ever, and it stopped me cold. And then it happened again with, with other sorts of things, more and more code. And, to my great amazement, some of the code was even correct. Now, a lot of it wasn't, a lot of it was a pain in the ass, but that was the early days where the warning shots of AI were being fired at, like, suddenly, it's not, the old joke was, well, it's, joke, not a joke, was telling coal miners, hey, yeah, you guys should have learned to code. Well, suddenly I'm the guy who learns to code, and suddenly you're like, what do I do if this thing's coming from my job? So yeah, it was a really freaky feeling. And in the months that followed that one, and it's only been like a year and a half that thing has happened, it has been expanding by leaps and bounds and so forth. Now, on one hand, absolutely amazing stuff. You could use, suddenly this AI tools that are available to you. There were concepts, because I'm learning brand new development environments at the time with the mobile and things like that, where, the usual way of doing this, once upon a time, back in the olden days, you could hope that there was a book or a manual or at least a website you could go to, which will tell you the ins and outs of how to use the new platform. Later on, after that, it became a series of web form postings and GitHub check-in requests and things like that that you'd be crawling through to try to learn your trade and so forth. And then more recently than that, you'd hope against hope that there would be some guy on the internet who was working with the project team who'd recorded, a thing that tells you, look, if you're doing this kind of thing, this is the part that will get you if you don't understand how it goes and so forth. And you tried to learn some aspect of it from them, because the problem is the field's moving too fast. There's no time for someone to write a nice comprehensive instructional manual for how to do most of the things you need to do to stay competitive in this, this stage. And when you're using a brand new development environment, like we were using with a thing called Maui, which is what we use for the mobile app, there was bloody little documentation for it at all outside of the direct utterances of the people on the dev team. And so, yeah, no, I'll admit there was times I was absolutely really struggling, and I'm posting. There used to be a thing called Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow, where if you're a programmer and you really know what you're doing, and you're really stuck, like you've been hammering on this problem for ages and you just can't crack it because there's some undocumented thing you need to know about or some whatever else, but you're stuck. At that point, it used to be what programmers and that thing would do is they would, put up a very concise example of exactly what the problem was. It'd be like their code, but they couldn't show their code usually, and you had to boil it down to just the basics, because you were hoping for that some other group of programmers on the planet would see what you're doing, take pity on you, and give you a breadcrumb clue as that might get you, on the path to enlightenment. Maybe you could crack the programming problem a day or two later if the gods smiled upon you. And that did happen a couple times over the course of developing the mobile apps. But it's a really rotten way to have to code. Nowadays, Stack Overflow, I think if they're not out of business yet, they're absolutely pointless, because nowadays AI tools for coding have gotten so bloody good that if you have a problem like, hey, I'm doing this thing according to this, instructions on the whole thing, and yet the behavior I'm seeing is completely different, blah, 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 what's the problem? All you have to do at this point as a programmer using most modern code programs is highlight that code and say, this isn't working right. tell me why I'm getting this, and it'll not only tell you why it's not working right, it'll explain it to you, and then it'll give you the corrected code, and it'll do it for you in the AI in a matter of seconds. Absolutely crazy. I mean, life changing if you're a programmer. It's you go from being someone who's like, yeah, I've spent years learning my craft. I really know the ins and outs of the whole thing, and I'm really good at it, and I can solve most problems, kind of like the way a clever detective can solve most problems. I would often describe what I do all day long is, yeah, I solve mysteries. That's kind of like the job. Nowadays, the AI coding tools have gotten so good that you get back to what you're really meant to be doing is instead of solving mysteries and putting out fires and doing things like that, no, now you're creating products, at speed and things that would normally block you for, seconds, minutes, hours, sometimes days, suddenly becomes things that block you for maybe a couple minutes and then, oh yeah, okay, moving on. And so it's really crazy how much this has accelerated things, but it also made it much, possible for us to once these tools got good enough to really be using last year, we said, well, wait a minute, we're actually ahead of schedule now as far as developing the next version of ComicBase. What if we suddenly use some of our extra time? I mean, I guess we could have just laid on the beach and loafed, but no, we said, well, how about if we used our time to use these tools and say, what are all of our pain points in ComicBase? Or what are all things that we feel like we waste time on? Like when we want to push updates, or we want to download, we want to download updates, or we want to rebuild lists of titles or things like that. How can we make these faster and really go to work of using machine intelligence to help augment what we're doing, have it set down timing flags, do all the things, and how can we make those things as optimal as it's possible for the computer to run them, and also to venture into areas of code that honestly would have been too complicated and too difficult to explore, that it wasn't worth the effort beforehand, like really involved use of multiprocessing, like using all the real power of your computer, all the different cores and threads they talk about when you buy a new machine, to use that to make everything much faster than before. And that's actually the gist of how we got Metropolis to be so much faster than all the previous versions of ComicBase. So that's something that's really come along for us, and it's only gotten better since then. It's crazy how productive some of this stuff allows you to be, and be sharing some of what we're doing with our sudden new coding superpowers in the future. But I do want to say that, yeah, even from the coding standpoint, it is absolutely freaking crazy. You guys have also undoubtedly seen what's happening with image generation and video generation. We went from like a year or two ago being absolutely amazed with what, when Sora made it so you could describe a scene and suddenly you're looking at that scene and it, in many cases looked pretty damn good. Sora, the world has gotten so much better than that in just a year and a half. That Sora's been retired. Sora is like the old horse you took out and is sold to the glue factory at this point. Whereas you have platforms like Dance 2 and so forth that absolutely astonishing. Well, which brings me then to Google I/O's conference, which just took place. Google I/O is the big developer conference for Google, where they talk about all their new initiatives. And if you have the chance, I honestly say, see if you can find one of the recap videos that's available online and take your time, pause the video about every 5 minutes and kind of take in everything they just dumped on you as far as what, Google alone has done in this field. And it's absolutely, it's jaw-dropping. There are video demos that go so far beyond anything I've seen before as far as the physics. They show like a rolling ball going through different types of materials. It goes through almost like a marble machine kind of, track and so forth, and syncing it up with, having the physics react properly as it traverses different types of materials and curves and bends and things like that, having the audio follow along, accordingly and so forth, having it do claymation versions of molecular models, which again, just describing real-time video effects. Like, I'm going to hold say, okay, here's me, and just imagine I'm holding a glowing, orb with a ComicBase logo in my hand right now. This is something that now can be done as a real-time video effect using some of the tools that they're showing. Yeah, I mean, absolutely astonishing stuff. The tools for doc preparation and agents and so forth. It's one of those things where like your mind kind of boggles about every 5 minutes when you realize what's the implication of what can now be done on the whole thing. And that's just Google. And I was typing a message to we have an AI Slack channel internally here at ComicBase. I was typing a message to someone just a couple of days ago, where I was sort of summing up my thoughts on where all the different players were going at at the moment. And as my take was basically, yeah, right now, you know, there'd been a big story about how Grok is the AI owned by X, Elon Musk's company, that uh, they were, good early entrants into the field. ChatGPT was kind of the first one that really got everyone talking about the whole thing. Grok came along a bit later, because it was called Grok because Elon's kind of a sci-fi nerd, and he had to have something that's like, basically after Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, to grok something is to really understand it. So that was what he called his AI. Grok was something I used a lot over the last year until more or less switching my coding stuff over to use Claude of late, because there were just some things where Claude was just better as far as cracking some very, very difficult problems. And it's gotten better since then. But one problem that Claude was having is Claude was running out of compute, which is to say the power to take. You guys have heard that they're just enormous data centers, just incredible amounts of computing powers needed to make all these models work, especially as the whole world starts adopting them. And along with a lot of computing power comes ferocious energy needs and absolutely ferocious cooling needs, because you have some of the world's smartest processors in rack stacked as densely as you can make them, grinding to their heart's content on all these insanely complicated problems, and you need to crazy amounts of power to power them, and that puts out an incredible amount of heat, which you need to flush out and then water cool throughout the other end of the whole thing. And it's just absolutely insane. Elon Musk famously stood up a data center called, I believe, Colossus out of near Memphis in something like 120 days. He basically bought vast, I think it was an old auto warehouse that was defunct, and installed like a third of the available cooling energy capacity that you could rent to power the thing, and about a third of the available cooling capacity you can rent. So the HVAC units from God came in to help cool this thing down, and and he built this out to power Grok, and that was great. But the problem that was coming along was that Grok was, it was an early entrant in the AI field, early meaning it's almost 2 years old now. But it wasn't getting it done as AI shifted towards more involved levels of work. Grok has some really nice tricks up his sleeve in terms of image generation. Yeah, it's not as good as some models, but it's got a few things. When Sora came in, everyone got very, very interested in using AI for video generation, and Grok actually does a pretty good job here. It does some nice things. It's still not giving you the kind of like director level control you would like in order to start shooting very serious things, but you certainly can make a pretty animated image of a girl walking down a beach, holding a glowing firefly in her hand or something. I mean, that sort of thing, absolutely eminently doable with Grok. But it was starting to fall behind because the real battleground in AI space is getting to be around agents and computing, like actual coding and so forth. And Grok was good, and it wasn't nearly good enough to be a competitor against ChatGPT's, cutting edge models in that space, as well as Claude, Anthropic with their Claude model. And they're starting to kind of like take it in the neck on that one. I on Super Bowl Sunday of this last year, it was the first time I got out my credit card and actually paid for usage of Claude, rather than just like throwing the odd demo question now and then when Grok was having a hard time solving something. It's like, what, I'm going here enough that it's time to start paying for this thing. And ever since then, I've gotten to the point where I'm actually just exhausting Claude's token usage regularly, when I'm doing heavy coding. Token usage is like it's a unit of how much information you've run through the pipe, and because it's a scarce resource and people are fighting it for it so very fiercely, they limit it. So even though you're paying, at this point, you can pay, there's a $20 level, a $200 level, and then there's the, just let the credit card roll level. But yeah, even when you're paying on the anything short of the just let the credit card roll level, it tends to be fairly easy to run out of tokens if you're not very careful. the cycle resets over a 5-hour window, but it's often, I would start thinking of my workday in terms of 5-hour long Claude shifts. Where like, okay, I'm going to work from this time till about that time. By then, I'll be almost exhausting how much I'm allowed to do, and then it comes, I've got an hour or whatever else to do something else, and then back to coding on the next phase, and then at night there's a next phase. And for a while they're even charging peak time. So if you're coding during like the regular day, then those tokens were more expensive than the others. You ran through them faster. Well, one of the things that came up of recent is that Grok, who was kind of lagging in the coding arena, and certainly hadn't entered the agent arena very much. They had this vast data center that wasn't really being used to its capacity yet, and Claude with Anthropic with Claude was dying for capacity. I mean, they were really up against it to the point where they're pissing off their customers, which at this point includes me, pretty regularly, because you can't provide all the compute power that's needed. So Elon Musk and Anthropic did a deal. They said, Elon says, well, look, I need time to rewrite our models because they weren't architected the way that you would want to be competitive in this today. We need to be able to enter fields like coding and design and video generation in a much more serious way than we're able to do right now. You guys, in the meantime, need compute capacity. So I'll tell you what, I'll rent you a bunch of our excess compute capacity. Which, by the way, if you're following the generation of data centers and so forth, is kind of how Amazon Web Services got started. They realized in order to run their e-commerce company, they were going to need to have just a massive web cloud that did not collapse on Black Friday and Christmas. In order to do that, they had to completely overbuild the thing for all the other days of the year. And that became a huge data center operation on their part in order just to keep their business running and not crashing during peak demand times. And they said, well, what do we do during all the other times? They said, well, we could rent it out. And then that became the most profitable part of Amazon, is Amazon Web Services. It's actually kind of fascinating. So history is repeating again right now with a big deal with X and SpaceX and Claude doing a deal to do this whole thing. And what it buys Elon Musk is time, because things are moving very, very fast right now. So who's to say in 3-4 months we're already seeing agentic models and other design models and so forth coming out of Claude. I mean, if you try to keep up with the announcements on the whole thing, it's absolutely it's coming out at a shocking rate. It really will just completely, like, everything you thought was the state of the game 3 weeks ago isn't the state of the game now. That's how fast the whole field is moving. So so the Google I/O conference was out just last week. I was just couple days earlier, I was saying, well, Gemini, yeah, they've got a couple tricks up their sleeve in terms of image generation, things like that. But honestly, I wasn't treating them as like a very serious player in the field. I said the one thing that Google's got going for them right now is that they are deeply integrated with everything Android, and they're also got every deep integration with everything search and that whole ecosystem of googly things right there. So expect to see all their offerings inflicted on you in everything you do. So if you guys are using Google Maps of late, you probably noticed that there's a brand new voice that came on the scene, and honestly, it's for me, a little cringe, and it takes way too long to let you get to going to your destination. I mean, it used to be the old one, with you launch your Android Auto and the whole thing, and say, look, I'm going to blah blah blah. Be like, okay, I'm directing you to blah blah blah, and you'd be done. The new guy's like, would you like to start going over to blah blah blah, located in East Nashville? Absolutely, I'll just get going on that for you, shall I? Okay. And he keeps on listening during the entire time he's gassing on. So if you sit there and say, yeah, could we just get going? He'll actually, oh, did you just want to get going? He'll actually be doing that kind of nonsense. So you have to learn to put up with his rather slow response, and also to keep your mouth shut and not comment on it until he's done talking. So I'm going to say, yeah, the early integrations, not incredibly mind-blowing in terms of where that went, at least as far as Google Maps. But I thought, okay, expect to see a lot more involvement with these voice assistants from Google in the future. I'm sure they'll get better, and undoubtedly will. I was not ready to see the string of announcements that they announced at I/O. When you're looking at Gemini Pro and Gemini Omni and so forth, there's some amazing stuff in there. Not all of it's been released yet. Some of it's in private, test tracks and so forth, and a lot of it's only available to people who are on the really heavy plans. But man, I mean, the demos are amazing, and we'll see how much the demo is real life as people start getting a chance to play with it. But I mean, this is stuff that, like, if this had come out a year ago when Sora was coming out there, you'd been like, screw Sora. I mean, why do I need any of this stuff? This is where it's at. But get used to that pace where the idea that pretty much everyone's latest announcement is going to be like, why did I listen to anything else here? This is so much better than that. That's how fast the field is moving. So, with all that said, um, my general take on it is, keep your powder dry. Don't get too invested in any particular platform. Be ready to switch. What they say, stick and weave. But if something gives you a competitive advantage in whatever it is you're trying to do in the whole thing, be ready to go and embrace the new thing. There is a switching cost, obviously, so you don't want to be doing this every 5 seconds, but you always got to be out there and at least give part of your brain out there in explorer mode where you're sitting there going like, is there something better for handling this task that I'm wasting my time keeping going with the old thing? So yeah, no, it's definitely something that's going on. Let's see. Oravia says, "Why can't the stinking AI write the bloody manual for the code to create it, or is there a cursive loop or an oxymoron?" Yeah, great freaking question. Funny thing is about manuals. I used to work quite closely with the docs division of, especially when I was doing contracting, or when I was back at Apple. I worked very closely with the docs writers when I was on the UX teams and so forth. And one of the more disturbing things we ever heard is that basically something like 0.5% of users will ever actually read the manual. And it was a number like 2 or 3% of users would actually open the manual ever. The most thing that people are ever doing is you sit there and you try to lovingly create these 100 and sometimes 1,000-page masterpieces of technical instruction of absolutely the clearest way possible to explain how something works. You're going through hell to make all this happen, and you're realizing that almost no one is going to do this. Almost everyone's entire path when they run into trouble on a computer is, how do I get past the one thing I'm worried about, and I will forget instantly the next moment, and that's really the challenge. So yeah, don't expect to see a lot of information about manuals. Steve Dassinger says, and I think he's about to give the announcement, so we'll let get on to that in a minute. Yes, and Oro says, yes, I just saw the build 4001 26.2 download fine. Okay, great. Anyway, so yeah, we'll get into the announcements in a bit here. I realize I'm going a bit long, but I did want to point to a couple more things as we go here. But yeah, as far as the AI goes on the whole thing, if you're in the field if you're trying to create pretty much anything, I mean, if you're, and the funny thing is, I've actually now got a luxury I didn't have. I don't remember when I've had, this. I mean, it's been literally decades of when you start a small company, there's pretty much always stuff that's on the plate of the, man, if I ever had time, I would love to do blah. There's actually things where, like, there was I want to say about a 21 hour period, I think a weekend or two ago, where the list of things that I was meant to do, all the projects that we had in progress, for one like tiny moment, we actually cleared the list. Like, there was nothing that we actually made a commitment to do that was not done at that point. Now, granted, then we had a chance after we had a couple beers and thought about it. We came in on Monday and of course filled the whiteboard, to the gills with new stuff. And that, I think, is for everyone who's worried about AI taking people's jobs. That, I think, is going to be the rule more than not. I mean, it's always really tempting when you think about these things to say, well, wait a minute, you're saying that you can do the work you used to do in a quarter of the time. And so that means you're going to need less people, right? And I'll admit, probably there's been some worried, looks at the staff meetings here at Human Computing when I mentioned things like that, oh yeah, you remember that task that you guys used to spend X number of hours a week on? Yeah, we can now do that in a fraction. So yeah, I admit there's probably a fair amount of lost sleep on the part of staff on the whole thing. But the thing I'm finding again and again that actually happens when you can automate or make much faster all the dumb, grating, annoying things that used to occupy all your time, is that once you get a chance to kind of like think on it for a bit, you come up with much more interesting things to work on that you kind of wish you could have worked on, but there was never time to do before. And that, I think, is the pattern through history, and my guessing it's the pattern that's going to happen now. Is, I mean, if an AI can do the work of 10 people, yeah, you could fire 9 of them and just do that work. Or better answer is, how about you just now do the work of 100 people keeping the same 10 guys? Think of how cool the future could be if you did that. And so that's, I think, where it's like all kind of coming from. So on that note, small minor announcement of the whole thing. So Metropolis, if you guys, we talked about some of the origins of how that, how that name came to be. Metropolis was the idea. I mean, I like it when there's hidden messages inside hidden messages. My mind just kind of works that way. So on one hand, it was a nod to the city and to interconnectedness and things like that. It was definitely also the art style that we used on it was very much inspired by the 1923 movie, the Fritz Lang movie Metropolis, where you might have seen the one robot. It was just called, I think, the woman. Sometimes I think it was called Ava at one point, or Maria, I think. But the canonical artwork for Metropolis in the comic-based world was an illustration called Eve 2, which was very much inspired by that robot. And it was the whole idea of okay, AI is here. It's made the world kind of nervous, but it's also made the world kind of really exciting at the same time, and we don't know where it's going yet. We don't know if it's a threat. We don't know if it's the gateway to a brighter tomorrow or something fantastic. And so it was very much, the AI thing's been in the back of my mind the entire time doing it. And so that's, in my head, that's why the name Metropolis probably got chosen for last one. The code name on the next one is Arcadia. And that's a little secret announcement on this one. So when we do our next major release, when this is not the quarterly release, this is the big one, the one where we change large portions of the comic-based world onto something else. And it's funny because it kind of bookends the same idea of of the Metropolis concept, where it's like, yes, it is a vision of the city and of things like that, but Arcadia is the vision of, it's almost like the imagery around it isn't, on one hand, and again, I love me my double meanings, but it's, you have the image of not just of Duran Duran's secondary, secondary, blow off band or whatever else, with Election Day. No, it's not just that. No, Arcadia, it comes from the Greeks, with the idea of almost like the agrarian paradise. It's the counterpoint to the metropolis, and it's been revisited different times through literature and so forth. And at the same time, in our version of it, it also is highly tech inflected. And for us, I think the real idea is what if in this tech heavy future of ours, what if it all actually kind of worked out? And that's, I think, the vision that we're going with in terms of the art theme of the next one. But I think, honestly, I think that's probably where we're heading as far as the actual future of the AI thing. I think AI's got our heads all kind of spinning, but I think if we're looking ahead, I don't know that we're looking at the really grimdark, version that we all kind of most easily came to mind with Terminators and AGIs that launch all the nukes and take over the world, and the superpowered machine that puts down John Henry with a steam shovel and throws us all out of work, or even Elon Musk's version of something where labor is so cheap that we all can sit around on our couches, eat Cheetos, and we'll all have to be given basic incomes in order to just kind of keep going, because between the AI and the robots, all our needs will be taken care of. I don't think humans work that way. I feel like at this point we've been kind of living in the AI-ified life for a bit over a year, and I feel like I'm starting to get to feel kind of some of its rhythms a bit better. And I think what we're probably going to see is, there will be people who check out. There will be people who get scared, don't adapt, things like that. I think there will be more people who use it to do incredible things, and to again, take on things there never would have been time to do before. I think that's probably what, when we look back on this age and say what we're worried about and what did we actually get, I think that's probably what we realize, or at least it's the way I'm betting. So, that's my thoughts on it. We'll see how it goes. As Aura points out, Arcadia also great play by Tom Stoppard. I should have mentioned. But anyway, so that's kind of where we're at on things. Have a look at the whole thing while you're at it. If you want to talk about something, is the guy uses a lot of AI generated imagery in a very interesting way, but that's not really the point of what he's doing. There's a YouTube guy, which I'm gonna just this is my blog pick of the week. Let me get the name of it because I promised myself I would remember without prompting, and then I immediately forgot what the name of it is without prompting. So let me look it up. How a guy his YouTube channel is called Comical Opinions. Now, I gotta admit, his the style, and let me see, can I get this on the screen in any kind of reasonable way? It looks like there it goes. No, it's just put it come on, edging the window. Can we? Can we? No, the window is just being weird. Anyway, no, I have no idea why the window is this size the way it did, but okay, so I'm just gonna roll with it right now. But there's a come on, you can do this. Get onto the monitor. No, no, I'm this is the problem. I'm working with about 7 virtual monitors right now, and none of them are playing nicely with me right now. So I'm just gonna move on. But look for a YouTube channel called Comical Opinions, and he has a really interesting one out this week. He's a guy who has lots of things to say about the comic book industry. And one thing that's interesting about it is the way he overcomes his own limitations as being able to talk about things is he actually uses a lot of AI generated imagery to just produce his videos. It's just a regular guy doing the actual talking on the whole thing, and great. And I've completely borked my own monitor on the whole thing. Terrific. Okay, closing the window. Let's see if that gets better. No, we have just completely. Wow, this is sweet. All right, I'm somehow has gotten dragged into video overlay land. All right, we're moving on. But yeah, he has an interesting article or talk this week about basically the way that comic companies know when the readers have checked out and how the entire omnibus and facsimile edition is based on the nostalgia for when honestly they were doing their job right and we were really in love with the medium. And I'm I'm gonna say there's a lot that he says there that I think bears thinking on. I'm not gonna give it 100%. Yeah, that's definitely the way it goes, but it's one of the first bits of comic commentary on the web that made me think, oh, I need to think about that here because the guy I think is definitely onto something. So yeah, give it a look. Comical opinions and see what you think. Yeah, I also hope for his sake that the makers of AI generating video get better in the future at allowing you to illustrate things using actual comic books. I know that it's funny because as you guys probably have figured out, just because we do a lot of things in the comic field, a very common request that I will have for my art guy is, hey, I want to have a list, a whole big spread of comic books flying overhead, or I want to have a desk with a whole bunch of 1950s comic books on it, and because we want to talk about some point having to do with that. And the funny thing is, this is exactly the sort of thing that if I don't care if the comics are real, that AI will generate in a heartbeat, and it'll do a beautiful job with it, better than we could ever have done it with using even the most expensive photo shoot, and it'll do it in time to actually hit the deadline for the article. Yeah, that's great, except that the censorship that's built into most AI tools or whatever they're doing always alters the details of the covers and the naming and the titles and things like that. And if you're an actual fan, whenever you see like a picture of an old room with a whole bunch of comic books scattered about it, your eye goes straight to the comic book and tries to figure out which issue of Action Comics is that, and you're staring really closely at the cover in the background trying to figure that mystery out. And so that's exactly the use case that AI is not made for in terms of this right now, until it's using real images. And certainly, if you've altered or otherwise messed with the images, it completely destroys the fans of need to obsess about those details. And it's one of the things that, unfortunately, I think for this guy, it marks. He clearly wants to be able to talk about a guy standing in a room with a whole bunch of Batman comic books piled up around him, or something like that. However you would describe the scene to an art director, which he clearly doesn't have a separate art guy. And the AI is it's delivering what the AI gives you in those cases, which you get the concept. it's actually a kind of a nice illustration if only they would not mess with the actual specifics of the thing. And if the moments drive me crazy, I hope for his sake in 6 months he finds a way around that problem. But the actual argument he makes in the video, I think, is actually quite interesting. So have a look at that one, see what you think, tell me what you say in the chat, and we'll take it from there. All right, guys. With that said, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who made it here, and I will catch you all on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.